welcome to this panel. I think we're going to have a wonderful hour together with some amazing guests. I'm Luke McKeever. I'm the CEO of Thomas. We're an AI-powered psychometric organization that looks at human connection, how to measure it, how to improve it, and the business impact of doing just that. Our conversation is going to explore an array of different topics around connection and what it means from different vantage points. So I'm joined by four amazing guests, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, what they do, where they come from, effectively in this conversation, and the lens through which they view the topic of connection for business. So without further ado, I'll introduce my first guest for this conversation, and that's Claire Cathcart. Claire.
Hello, thank you for having me. So I've worked in HR for a long time, so heading towards 20 years. I started my career working for a security company, very quickly moved into the large corporate space, worked there for 10 years, and then moved into the SME world. So over the last kind of 10, 15 years, very much in-house HR, in a range of industries across leisure, security, utilities, so a really interesting kind of widespread career. And then more recently, I'm the founder of Elevate Hub, so I now support HR people to develop their skills, their knowledge, their confidence in their careers.
Nice.
So yeah, self-employment, very different to in-house, but yeah, interesting career.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Jodie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I am Jodie Hill. I'm the founder of Thrive Law. We are an employment law firm. So my background was I set Thrive up after having really struggled with my own mental health, probably from disconnection and the way I felt in the workplace, but particularly couldn't find another law firm that actually put well-being on the agenda rather than an afterthought. So I decided after having a breakdown that'd be a really good idea just to set my own law firm up at only 4 years qualified, which was a bit nuts thinking about it. But the reality was I couldn't find a workplace to go back to. So for me, there's a bit of a personal angle. I also wear the neurodiversity lens because I'm neurodivergent, and obviously being a lawyer, looking at the kind of the I suppose the impact that disconnection has from a legal perspective and the legal risk that it creates. I'm looking forward to talking about that today.
Fantastic. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome to you both. Next guest is Alison.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Hi, I'm Alison Ettridge. I've spent 30 years in the world of talent in some way, shape or form. I founded a labour market analytics software business, which I exited, and I'm now founder of a business called Amplitask, and we focus on what does the future of work mean, both for the next generation, but also for HR practitioners and for data. So the lens that I'm bringing is one of optimism and not doom.
And also a bit of data expertise through all of those.
Lots of, yes, so forgive me, yes, there's data underlying.
And optimistic in a human sense or optimistic about connection?
I think I'm optimistic about the connection of humans in a technology-driven world.
Nicely put. Okay, we'll explore that.
Very nice.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sam, yes.
So I'm Sam Buckley. I run the non-direct business at Thomas, so I'm VP of Partnerships. And I've been in HR tech for 17 years, which is bizarre. That's where I started my career and I never left. And I joined Thomas with the view that connection and being manifest as a problem can be hopefully solved by technology. So I'm going to look at that from that lens today and hopefully be able to provide some context as to how we're going to shape the future together.
Fantastic. So welcome everybody. It's going to be a great discussion. So we've got practitioners, we've got lawyer and legal expert, and I guess that neurodiverse perspective as well, which will come through a bit. And I love the way you've referred in the past to your I can't remember the name now. I was going to say breakthrough.
That's right.
But you called it
breakdown.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough.
Exactly.
So I love the way you've referred to it as a breakdown, not a break. Sorry, a breakthrough, not a breakdown. So we should perhaps explore a little bit of that as well. Would be super. And then we have that lens of data. And I think the tech optimist is really key. I'm a tech optimist, but I'm also a tech skeptic, which is somewhat ironic, given that I've been in tech for a long time. And then we have the ultimate tech passion here on the left, thinks and breathes it in Sam. So I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation. So the challenge we're set with today is we have a world of work that whichever magazine you pick up, podcast you listen to, LinkedIn post you read is becoming more fragmented and potentially more disengaging. And you see stereotypes around particular generations behaving in different ways, expectations changing, certain amounts of skepticism and fear related to AI. There's the more macro political environment that seems to jeopardize connection. There's lots of things going on. So we appear to have lots of tech product and lots of solutions that HR teams are putting together and you're advising people to put in place, but they're not necessarily all working or working in the way that we'd expect. Can we explore a bit of your perspective on that? And I don't mind who wants to start first, but let's think about what do we think are the underlying drivers and why are we experiencing, if indeed we are experiencing, this level of disconnection in the workplace today? Who'd like to go first?
I can definitely start because I see a lot of this. So I work with HR people directly, and I also rewrite CVs for people that are outside of HR. Okay. And people never come to me and say, I'm looking for a new job because I want more money. They say, can you help me write my CV? I have to leave this job. The relationship with my manager has broken down. I don't feel valued anymore. There aren't opportunities to develop. So it's all of those things that I think are driving the disconnection, and they just feel this isn't a place that I can work anymore. And they've made that decision that I need to rewrite my CV and I need to get back out into the job market.
Do you think it was always that way, or is that trend increasing, those reasons for leaving?
I think the workplace has definitely changed in the last probably 5 years or so. Technology is definitely a factor. We see last year 150,000 people were made redundant, so teams are becoming leaner. There's more pressure on workload. So from my perspective, I think the manager has a very tough job, and it's they have a lot on their shoulders to build that relationship, build that connection with their teams. But as also individual contributors that are now more stretched than ever, I think that's a very difficult place for them to be in. So I think it's a combination of lots of different factors over the last few years.
Do you think there's been a deprofessionalisation of the management role as well to some extent? In my day there were, and I'm going back 30 years, that's not a real word, is it? But about 30 years ago there used to be people, there was a whole layer that didn't have a job other than to manage talent. And as a result of that, that was a profession. Yeah. And they were trained accordingly, and they hopefully in some cases excelled. And then they'd have a team of doers. And now that absolutely doesn't exist anywhere. From like everyone's got a job and they're a manager. And perhaps not as well equipped. Does that feature at all?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's true, actually.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I think you talk about humans being disconnected. I think the data is disconnected, which doesn't help the humans that are then managing. But I think we still do have managers. We're just putting the wrong people in the managerial roles.
The wrong people?
Yeah. I think so. The wrong set of skills. Right, let me put it that way. So I think that in days gone by, so let's go back to the 30 years ago, you had managerial training, you had leadership training, you had communication training. So there was a wraparound for how do we make this work, and you didn't just take your best salesperson and turn them into a manager, because those two things
though, didn't it?
It did still happen, but I think it happened less than it happens now.
So the question is, you said the right skills, but is it these trainable skills that
Of course they are.
Okay.
Yeah, of course they are.
So it's not like a base heuristic.
It's not like Bob is wrong, right? Yeah, Bob could be developed into being really good at that role. Yeah,
right.
So
it's about the fact that we're not equipping people.
Correct.
Correctly.
Yeah,
right.
correct.
And what could we be doing differently then?
Well, I think defining the role would be a good starting point. Defining the work, and then defining the skills that are required in order to deliver that work to the best of that person's ability.
And then providing the infrastructure to enable
and providing the data and the infrastructure to, joining the data up, right, so that the data makes sense, rather than having in 20 different tech systems, right, and then saying, okay, it's fine, you make the call. I don't know, Claire, is that...
I do think the role of a manager has significantly changed in the last few years as well, with the introduction of hybrid working. We talk about millennials and Gen Z and different expectations that they have. So I do agree that back in the day, listen to me, back in the day, that managers were people managers for sure, but I think even that role of people manager has changed significantly. So whether you trained your managers a few years ago, they need ongoing continuous development to be able to navigate what that managerial role looks like today.
Yeah, the world of work has just completely changed to what it was, and I think this always on but not connected kind of workplace where you know your manager can message you at midnight and it's like, am I supposed to respond, am I not? Like there's this, I don't know, I think particularly since lockdown there is a very different way of managing, and even those people who were trained before, they were trained to manage someone in an office, right? So now you have all the extra technology and the fact we're so always on and not, you know, it's completely inaccessible for, you know, well, if you turn your phone off and the manager can't get hold of you, how does that make you feel as well? You know, it's like the feeling of that. So certainly there is, I agree about the training point. Part of what we do is we have a training company and we train people, particularly around things like difficult conversations and communication, and layering that with inclusion lenses and thinking about, well, what are the legal parameters, but kind of, I suppose, using the legal pieces like the floor and working towards the ceiling of being an awesome manager. But actually, my experience is different to what you were saying, because in the legal profession, if you're good at law, you get made a manager or you become a partner, and actually they're bloody rubbish, most of them, at managing people. And then they don't have the tools all the time, because law is very much based on how much you bill in lots of firms is by the hour. And so there's a massive disconnect there in relation to how much time should I spend on managing people and upskilling myself from a people perspective, or how much time do I have to keep up to date with the law and speak to my clients and network and bring work in. So I think from my perspective, there's always been this piece of, if you're really technically good, you become a manager, but there's been a huge lack of clarity on what the expectations are, back to your point about the role, and how much time you should spend in those areas, but also the infrastructure. And, you know, people are all using lots of different tools now, and it's like, how do I manage that? And am I supposed to tell them they can or can't use it? There's a lack of clarity, I think, for a lot of managers, and a lack of framework and support, which really ends up meaning that employees feel a bit lost, but also managers do.
Yeah, and actually they feed the culture that's fitting. I mean,
sure.
we see that. We have a tool that you're all familiar with and you've all seen, which is this connection measure that allows us to take a pulse on how a team is feeling. It's a great lens for a manager just to have a quick check-in and go, you know, which element is this team struggling with at the moment? Often it can be all 6 dimensions. We won't go into those now, but it really is important, because it's very hard to tell, because I mean, even I struggle now. You know, we haven't got that big a company, but we're distributed around the world. I don't know whether I message on Teams, whether I send an email, whether I put it into one of our other social channels. I just don't know how to make sure that everyone gets to see it, whether I do it on a stand-up, on a call. Generally speaking, you'll only get 60 or 70% of people to participate and watch what you've said or read into that. And I think it is generally harder because there's just too many channels. But
what was interesting was that the thing that came last in that description was you talking. Right, it was, do I use technology to disperse it first? And you know, maybe that's the situation for where we are, is, you know, that our first go-to is, how do we use these channels to get this done fast? It's not a criticism of you. It's just, that's how we all operate now, rather than how do I do a stand-up? How do I have a video call? How do I have a conversation, God forbid, right? Yeah, and pick up the phone and talk to someone. So I think it's quite interesting.
Well, people, I mean, the stats tell us, and Sam, you probably got some stuff on this, that people leave their managers rather than the companies. Your example at the
100%.
beginning of the introduction.
Yeah.
And we did some analysis. The weighted analysis showed us that it was like 68% of the reason why someone would leave would be related to their relationship to their manager. 65% of it would be related to their colleagues and whether they feel like they fit in, whether they're connected in some sort of meta way with the ethos of that team. What can people do about it, Sam? What have you seen?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's not only the fact that the manager is one of the largest reasons to leave an organisation, but there were some stats we pulled from a session we did a couple of weeks ago in New Orleans, and it was done by Dr. Autumn Krauss at SAP. And the stat that scared me the most about that was that 59% of managers polled on a very large survey would prefer AI management to their current manager.
Wow.
So scary. And it's like, so it's not just the fact that that manager wants to leave, it's that they actually now are so disconnected that they prefer and trust and rely on essentially a robot in the.
But that's so interesting because it's probably to do
being.
with the way that it's kind of prompted, isn't it? Because AI is designed to make you feel good.
Exactly.
Right?
It's authoritative by nature, right?
Yeah.
So people buy into it because it sounds like it understands you and it knows what it's talking about. And in reality, if those employees are using something that the business hasn't trained, the models and things that you can actually introduce, they might not have done that. In fact, they're very unlikely to have. They're probably paying for a subscription on, an external tool. Then you're into a bit of hot water, aren't you?
Yeah.
So it's that trust element that I think is just completely dissipated from the workforce. It's quite interesting, and I genuinely don't know what we can put our finger on, because I was talking to everybody yesterday, and what's interesting is when you're in the right place. There's that imperceptible human condition of knowing that you're in the right place. Everything seems to be flowing and you get on with everybody in the room, and then the results start coming. And I think for the first time, we've actually got a measure that can take you through that. I think the difficulty, though, is embedding it in the day-to-day flow of work for managers. Because without constant guidance, which you guys have all picked up on, and without these constant reminders and nudges to help you get that little bit better and check in with the team, which we know drives performance and profitability now, then it's kind of moot. Because turning up to a one-day management course every 6 months, what's the likelihood I'm going to retain that after a week because of the day-to-day job? It's, I think, completely impossible. So it's that embedding of it and that constant iterative nature of keeping managers going and in the loop, I think, will be the best possible way to help.
It's well put. I think it also just not leaving them as isolated, assuming they know how to do it.
Yeah.
And it isn't about a sort of training session once a year. I remember having a 2-day, a kind of a minute manager training course in about 1993. I still hold on to the first principles. I still use that guidebook. It was like, that was what it was. It was enough, right? I'll get through. Now I'm going to work with the sort of, and it's really hard. So every time I come into a management training, it kind of conflicts with anything else that I've learned, and it's really hard to do that. That kind of just-in-time friend, or and this is where AI can actually really help if it's well constrained. The challenge I see with AI, I'd love to have other people's opinion on this. Is and this came through in a lot of research over the last couple of weeks, is the way the AI is built is it's trained on a certain data set, it's configured and guardrailed by the provider, who is not necessarily as incentivized to do good as they could be. Doesn't mean they're malevolent in the way that they operate, but they just don't have the same need for it to provide constrained and positive and fair input. How do you see, Claire, for you, you use AI prolifically, I would imagine.
Yes,
it's with your role, I would imagine. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So how do you see it as an assistant to you, as a colleague, as a manager, as a thought partner? How does AI work for you in your work, and how do you think it works in the lives of others in your industry?
Well, I will say I think there are pros and cons of AI. And it comes down to the training of AI that we were talking about kind of earlier. Personally, I use it to structure thoughts, create documents for me. There's lots of useful tools out there. So I host a podcast. It can create clips for me in minutes. Lots of things that it can do to kind of save me time. But what I'm seeing from the HR community is that they're joining the HR membership because they want connection. So, of course, you can go to Claude or whoever and say, hey, can you give me the answer to this ER question? But what they really want is someone that has experienced that issue themselves personally, someone that's been through it, and to reassure them that that's the right answer and the next steps.
It's a trust thing, right, as
100%.
well, because they can ask further questions and it's coming from experience, not from something that's, I don't know how you describe, because it doesn't have experience, it's just trained on data, and that's different, isn't it?
But we were talking yesterday about, I think we both had our arguments with AI at various points and saying, are you sure? Like, is that really correct? And when you prompt it and challenge it maybe 6 or 7 times, it will come back and go, well, actually, I think you might be right, which is quite scary. For a HR practitioner early in their career, you can't always trust AI. So
And they're important decisions that impact the
Yeah.
culture as well. If you're making decisions using AI, there's legal implication around that on the basis that you're still, as the company, liable. It's not the AI that's liable. They're very clever on passing that off. So ultimately, you make that decision without speaking to a practitioner or without speaking to a human. And it sits with you because you've just followed what AI has told you to do. There's been so much in the media recently about it, and I think, again, it goes back to that point about not losing our ability to think for ourselves as well and make decisions for ourselves. Like, we have to be comfortable with decisions that we make based on the data. Now, the data might be obtained from AI, but it's being satisfied that if we, for example, and obviously I'm a lawyer, so if I was going to think, if I was an employment judge and I'm sat in, and I don't know, for example, you're the witness and the judge is asking you, so when you made that decision, what did you consider? What did you challenge? Would you be comfortable being that person sat there if I'm the judge questioning you? And a lot of people then step back and go, I don't know if I could sit behind it. And I think that's a really important part of having those discussions with human beings as part of a team. And certainly as a law firm, we're hybrid, but we have tech to help us communicate. But actually a lot of our discussions, like even yesterday, I spoke to one of my staff. She's like, can I just jump on a call to talk through this case? She can use AI. That's not a problem. But she got to a point and was like, I want to check it with you as a person.
Yeah.
And I think that's really powerful.
So that's quite an extreme end, isn't it? That's the sort of legal ramifications of using it and then saying, can I stand by the recommendations that were received? What are those kind of managerial micro moments that we experience where we know that we need some help, but we're not sure how to get it? And how much should we rely on AI in those situations?
So I don't manage people any longer. So the question will
Is that
probably
a good thing
lead-
or a bad
it's
thing from your
great
point of view?
thing. I'm trying to manage myself.
But am I
which I'm
right in thinking
really
you
bad doing.
have a bunch of agents that you're
I
now
have
managing?
I have a bunch of agents. So I have
How many?
I have 7 now.
Okay.
So
and what
I
roles
have.
do those agents play?
I can't remember all 7. I knew you were going to ask me. I should have written them down. So I have a chief of staff,
Yeah.
and the chief of staff agent looks at my calendar, looks at my emails, and tells me the things that I need to do each day that I need to take priority on. So that to-do list of the stuff that needs to happen rather than the stuff that I want to do, right, is now managed by an agent. This is the stuff that you have to do today. I still do it, but it helps me to focus effort. I have one that writes keynotes for me, right, and says this is how to develop this into a structure, and then I add my thought and my creativity to it. But the agent that, and actually I have advisory boards for each of my different clients. So I work with a number of different tech businesses, and I have an advisory board for each of those clients that brings a lens in. So it might bring scientific evidence based on psychometric testing to the table, for example. It might bring employee listening data to the table. It might bring data from David Green, right, at Insight 222, and bringing his thought process to the table. So it helps me say, yes, this is Alison's view, but let me think about this through a different lens. And that leads on to the agent that's probably the most useful one, which is the one that challenges me, right? And so it's not, and that's to do with using it correctly, right? So I always put in my prompting, do not make stuff up, do not take anything from any source that you can't. Yeah, exactly. So you lose that, I might be wrong piece. But you get to the point where it helps me be more creative in my thinking and conversations, because I might say, and what would the things that a CFO be interested in hearing be? What are the things, if I'm talking to a CFO, what might he or she want me to be thinking about? Or if I'm talking to an HRD of an SME, what might he or she be thinking about? Or if I'm in this industry. And so it really starts to shape and grow my
So could I
thinking.
challenge that on the basis that so let's say you had an unlimited fund of money and you had the opportunity, pot of money, and you had the opportunity to hire 10 brilliant people to work with you, and you were based in the same location, or you were close enough that suited you so you could see them when you needed to see them, and they were there as thought partners. Would you prefer that environment, or would you prefer your AI agent friends?
I think that's a different
I have
role.
to remove all constraints, right? So this is, in other words, you can afford them. There's no implication of that. But you have individual.
So I don't think
partners.
there's a replacement for having a conversation with a human, right, and being challenged by a human, right? And I'm not advocating that in any way, shape, or form. What I'm saying is that actually, as a human, I can grow more. right, by having these challenges in a safer space, right, than an employee, right, or as a thought partner. Would I hire a chief of staff in replace of my chief of staff agent? No, absolutely not. Would I hire a brilliant thought partner to help me look at the workflows that we're doing as a business and say, how can we re-engineer those processes and where can we amplify the human, right, and reduce the crud? Absolutely, I would.
So I've known you for a while. You're a very friendly, sociable person generally, and you're phenomenal in sort of interpersonal conversations. So where do you feed that part of you? If you're working this much time with an AI, how do you get that part of your personal need met?
Oh, that's a really good question. I still have a family, and so I do talk to them
horses.
quite a lot, and I have horses, and I also run an Airbnb, right, which has guests in. So there's a lot of people in my life. I think that I spend a lot of time at conferences. I spend a lot of time in meetings. I spend a lot of time doing the human piece, right, and talking to people. And there's no replacement for that.
Okay.
But equally, and I might be the baddie in the room here, right? But equally, it's quite nice just to get on with stuff, right, and not have humans interfering with that work process, right? And so it's about compartmentalizing the bits of work where I just need to get it done, right? And how do I get it done, and how do I make me more efficient? Right? And the fact that I have agents to help me do that doesn't mean it's not me. It's just helping me be more efficient.
Has anybody started to see the quality? Thanks for that. The quality of the AI output starting to homogenize in some way.
Yeah.
I was talking on a call this morning. Sam was with me on that, and I've started to get a lot of my colleagues sending me clearly generated AI reports. And the slightly frustrating thing for me is the bloody length of them. So instead of doing something which would, normal human being, you ask them to do something, they'll do it in the minimal way as fast as they humanly can, and you get a nice, concise report. I've now got everyone's the smartest person in the room, and I've got this 15-page report to wade through that's fully organized. Why should I care about this? And it's like all the introductory formats that Claude loves or ChatGPT loves. Has anyone started to see this kind of almost blandification of content start to appear?
Yeah, we've seen it a lot with people putting grievances and claims in, and they all look the same, like the same structure, like you say, really, really long, and just made up claims, as in like quoting law that doesn't exist.
Oh wow!
So
not
really,
even checking.
yeah. So and obviously, if people are litigants in person, they don't check it with a lawyer. So what we're seeing is like lots of the same type of stuff coming through, but obviously employers are having to deal with that, and it then becomes so protracted because it's such a long grievance, and they're so sure because Claude's told them it's right that they've got this case, so now they're absolutely gunning for it, and the relationship fully breaks down. Yeah. And obviously, the point of a grievance is really to try and resolve an issue, but the way I actually don't think AI is helping with that. No. I think it's damaging the ability to achieve an amicable resolution, and it's becoming much more protracted, much less connected, and ultimately meaning that people are going off sick or leaving. So we're seeing it a lot. And if you look on LinkedIn, there's loads of other practitioners, and you've probably heard of this in your network, saying the same thing. It's becoming a huge problem because it's absolutely burdening the people team, the founders, whoever it's being issued to, because they have to deal with it.
So if we think about that, because I can imagine that happening and getting worse and worse and really snowballing, was everyone becomes an expert with advice. Yeah. And they're not even, unfortunately, capable of filtering you're proving that, filtering into truth the things that have been provided by the large language model. You're an optimist. You're also a solopreneur, right? So you've got you're literally trying to scale yourself to be even more effective, and it's clearly working for you. So, it's different from being part of an entity, leading a company, leading an initiative. You're also a solopreneur in your new capacity. So do you use AI in the way Alison does to have like thought partners and collaboration partners? You talked about it from a content point of view.
Yeah, so I don't have lots of agents in the same way. So I love the speed of AI, and you just want to get through work, and you might use it as a coach and ask questions. So from that perspective, it's really helpful. But I've used AI to ask how I could grow my business. How could I expand into different spaces? And the best advice I have received was from a businessman who grew his business to 200 million and sold it. And that was the best advice I had from someone who had lived experience.
I'm literally about to say those words.
I've been speaking to AI a lot. How do I do this? And, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah.
So, answering the question that you asked Alison earlier, I would have people all day long.
So that's an interesting one. So you were an HR leader in a number of different businesses, you said at the beginning. And so you've been in different roles inside different sized organisations, and you must have enjoyed some of those cultures. I know you have a backstory about one particularly unpleasant boss that you had at one point, which sort of almost took you out and set you on this journey. So you can, I think, with a bit of forgiveness, thank them for that, right?
100%. Very happy.
But what do you miss about the connection of other people, and how do you fill that need in your life?
So within the Elevate Hub, I've actually created a team of, I call them experts, because that, I guess that the need to work with people, have the interactions, that high yellow energy, different personalities, I absolutely needed that. And as a HR practitioner, I've been a generalist for my entire career. So brokering the services of specialist was something that I'm just very used to. So very quickly, when I set up my business, I brought people in to be experts within the hub and within the membership. So I don't feel the need to use AI in the same way to have very structured agents. I use it to dip in and out to gather information and knowledge that is helpful for me to then progress. Maybe there's an opportunity for me, Alison, I don't know. I need to be doing more with agents, but right now the people element for me is still important. And I do think people are craving human interaction more than ever because of the increasing AI.
And I think that's where I get optimistic, actually, is that I think that used properly, we can use AI to free up time to enable us to be. I work fewer days now than I have ever worked, and I am more productive than I have ever been, which gives me more time to be me. Right, it gives me more time to spend time with the people that I love, and to be creative, right, and to think differently. You can't just take a tool and chuck it at someone and say, crack on, right? Because that's when it all goes wrong.
I think we tried that. I was hands-on, hand up here. So years ago, when I first arrived at Thomas 3.5 years ago, I was like, everyone needs to get comfortable with AI. We all need to start exploring large language models. And of course, 1% do it, 2% do it, because it's so terrifying, right? Yep. And then there's lots of research that show a small percentage of people lean in hard, and a larger percentage of people are generally resistant. But we're talking to the people that are already playing every day in it and saying, isn't this great? And everybody else is going back going, my job, what's happening to my job? And actually some of the things you've said, Alison, would make people feel nervous, particularly if you're a person who's really good at organising things. And one of the skills that we know is really good, anything that's repeatable, AI is probably better at it than we are, because we're not supposed to be doing that kind of work. We're arguably more human than that. But people are paid to do those jobs, and there is a risk associated to it. So it's not, the fear is only partly paranoia and partly true. And we every single newspaper you pick up on is talking another article about X thousand people being chopped because AI has been used, which is a misrepresentation in some cases, we know. But Sam, we know in Thomas, connection is hugely impactful. Your introduction, Claire, was very profound on this. The reality is a lot of people work and come to work for that connection, because connection isn't just about belonging, it's about how we connect with ourselves in that environment. Do we recognise the person that's presenting in that room? We talk about connecting to our colleagues, to our managers. How do you see the world of connection and technology and AI marrying?
It's a great question, and one we've permeated on for a while. I think the importance is to, you're right, converge or merge the two elements. So if everybody is going to be using AI tools, and then that's in the context of either a chatbot or they're using it through some kind of means within the platforms, then we've got to converge them at the point that people are already at. That's my kind of opinion. It's got to be in the flow of where they already are or where they want to be, because otherwise, it's completely, irrelevant. They will never use it. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Oh, I fancy some software." Right? No one. Not a single person.
Love a new app.
I tell you what I'm missing, the 175th app for the day.
See what I mean? Nobody. Everyone likes the outputs of what they make. So if disconnection is, as widespread as we understand it to be, and AI is literally in everybody's pockets or at their fingertips in a laptop, then those two things have got to converge. So the purpose of what we're trying to achieve is that we can essentially understand the individual much more deeply. So I've sold HR tech for 17 years, right? And I'm going to say something fairly inflammatory in that these systems have massively let us down over the course of time. They're great historians, they're very weak advisors, right? We've got more data than we've ever had before about the humans at work and have very little ability to do anything about it. The gulf is so widespread. And what we've done over the course of time is go, oh, right, we've got a problem with performance, so we'll build a performance management module, as if that was ever going to make a big difference. It's quite funny when you look back and think of all these things. And these systems are great systems of record, and they'll maintain because they're essentially a legal requirement. But what they're missing is any intrinsic value to the individual. I don't want to go and use it. Do you guys like going onto a HR system and
nope, never use it.
Of course you don't, right? You don't use it. You just don't use it. Less than 5% of people log into these systems every day, and they're billions and billions and billions of dollars of software. So how do we get people into them? To connect to the platforms and then therefore connect to the people and produce better performance and better productivity. That's like the golden ticket, I suppose. So what we're proposing is that we can basically take the Thomas data set, so all of the profiling we do around who you are, how you want to learn, your aptitude, your leadership potential, the raft of data we hold about an individual, and inject that into the flow of work agentically via MCP technology. That's quite new and quite exciting for Thomas. So that instead of knowing very little about your people, just their salary and where they live maybe and what their performance score was last cycle, it's just bad. So what we're now saying is like, well, wouldn't it be great if when that individual started and we held that data, that we could completely and utterly hyper-personalise their experience of work, so that from a workflow perspective, we're going to adapt their learning. So, hey, do you know, if I stood up, as a teacher stood up in this room right now, very few of us around the table, I think, would be happy with that learning environment. I don't want to be rated to all the time. I want someone give me something and
to do.
Give me something to do. And so why do we all go through the same e-learning process where you sit and watch a video and you write an exam? It's bizarre. We don't want that anymore. And this data set can genuinely adapt the experiences we have at work so that the individual feels more connected to the work that they're going to be doing, but the people then that are around them, so that we can really drive that.
But what's interesting in what you said is that it doesn't relate to you, or you're joining it together so that it relates to increased productivity or business performance. And that's the key, right? Because at the moment, there's this massive disconnect between the data that you get out of your HR system and the actual impact that it has on the business, right? HR teams understand it and know it, but the business leaders need it turning into a dollar value, right?
That's right.
And if it's not in a dollar value, then actually, what are you doing? I was at chairing the People Analytics World Conference, actually just up the road from here, about a month ago. And a guy stood up and he said, if you are leading a People Analytics team right now and you don't know the business problem that the data is solving, what are you doing? Right? It's just, why are you gathering the data?
That's the point.
And actually, that's
hoping
fine.
the data will reveal the answer without knowing what it is you're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And to Sam's point, we've got loads of data now, right? So you've got to understand what's the business problem you're trying to solve, and that might be growth as much as it might be efficiency. I think that's the balance in the AI world that we need to
Does it also go back to the point that you were saying before about the managers not having the tools and not having the information about the teams that they have? So yes, part of it is training, but part of it is actually having the information, right? It's understanding their teams to the core.
Exactly.
And a lot of the time people can't, I suppose, objectively tell you, I need this. They can't always articulate that. So using using tools that can help us to understand, first of all, the individual themselves better, but the manager being allowed to understand them better to start those conversations. And I've also used Thomas for difficult conversations. So, if it's a conversation on giving someone feedback, how best to approach that, how to position the questioning, how to do that. Part of it is, yes, I ask people, but part of it is also what we don't know. And that's where I think the tools are really, really helpful, because it's giving us the confidence and the skills and the tools to be able to have those more difficult conversations that if we don't have them, we become disconnected.
Agreed. Don't you think it's funny that now feedback, I was talking to somebody slightly off topic, but about texting. I can't bear it because I can't tell tone. I don't understand like the message. It baffles me. And I know that makes me sound
I'm with you, by the way.
Which is why you send me voice notes instead.
Yes, I do.
So, and if you frame that in a work context, if somebody sends you a Teams note at 5:30, and you're the kind of person that's going to...
Is that 5:30 in the morning, like me, or 5:30?
Sorry, I'm talking 5:30 Friday after work, not your usual 5:30 to me. But that could be, to the wrong person, could ruin their weekend.
Yeah.
Because they don't have the tone, they don't have... And so doing that to somebody can just completely ruin a few days of their own personal downtime. And it's just not really very fair. So communication style, preferences, these things are important. And we just don't actually consider the individual in it because we're so busy and those managers firing things out left, right and centre to try and collate something without any ability for the system to just, hey, by the way, it's 5:30. This person wouldn't like this.
But there's a counter to that, isn't there? Which is that the manager's still got to have the data. Because if the manager picked up the phone and said the same thing to you in the wrong tone, it could still ruin your whole weekend.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
so
I
it's
don't
not just
disagree,
about a human delivering it. It's about understanding the people.
Exactly, before you pull the
Before
trigger.
you do whatever that might be.
And you'll have your own preferred communications. I
Yes.
advise another company, and the CEO of that business absolutely hates receiving a cold call out of the blue. So and I didn't know this, and eventually he said, I hate it when you ring me. I was like, personally, I have this anxious reaction to a cold phone call.
Yeah.
I was like, well, thank you for telling me. I wish I'd known that.
Yeah, my voicemail says, do not leave me a voicemail, I will not listen to it. And it's always on silent, do not disturb. But I've told my team that, and I've told my clients as part of our communication agreements that we have. And actually that was really important for me, because people are like, I can never get hold of you, but I was free. It's just, you have to message me first.
Because I need to know what you're going to say.
And I think at the beginning I mentioned a neurodivergent lens, and it particularly leans into that inclusion piece of people feeling like they belong. And when you're neurodivergent, you struggle more with tone, you struggle more with communication than a neurotypical person. So this is where tools can be really, really helpful to not just the individual, but to the manager to have to bridge that gap.
Yeah. I think there's two. I think I absolutely agree with that totally. I think it's not just in that category as well. You've got people just too busy, right?
Yeah.
It's part of it. Yeah. And we've discussed, the connection being this foundational requirement. It's the lubricant, if you like, that makes the machine run, right? Because without it, we've done longitudinal research, quite extensive research with our psychology team. Discretionary effort disappears. Right? So if you haven't got discretionary effort, you haven't got a business, because all the stuff happens at that extra bit of genius, that extra bit of co-work, that heavy lift that somebody does. If you've just got people going through the motions, this is what we're seeing, a disengaged workforce. And I know everyone's surveys say, hey, I'm at 82%. So how is the general world is actually running at 20%, but everyone's getting their 80% statistics? And we know that's survey fatigue. We know it's survey inflation. We know it's questions that are self-serving. There's lots of reasons why that data isn't necessarily reflective of how people feel. But if you don't get the discretionary effort that's only provided when you're pulling in a team you like, working for a manager you like, doing a project that excites you, feeling like the thing that you're doing is going to deliver meaningful, traceable results, feeling like you're going to get the reward that you want. And the reward is very different. You pointed it out perfectly, Sam. Some people work for recognition. Others work to finish and go and play with the horses and the family. Other people work to earn. Not so many as people would like to think. Other people work because the work's complex, or they like the social elements. But knowing that, and we do know that with the propensity data that we have, we can tell what's driving someone. And I look at these reward and recognition systems, a whole category that I think is made out of something out of nothing. And there's even more disparaging, because there's probably going to be some of our partners in in that. But tools, so long as they're a subcategory inside their other platform, I'm okay with it.
I'm sure you've got data that can
But the
help
old
to
idea that all of a sudden Bob's going to love a pat on the back publicly from someone that he's never met before. Well, I would hate that, and I know others would.
Disingenuous, really.
But a £20 token with your wife to go out for dinner, £20 wouldn't get you anything, but £200 token to go out for dinner, that might mean something because I can take it out of work and get rewarded in that way. But knowing who the individual is and then being able to reward them connects them and gets you that. The ultimate goal is that discretionary effort, because that's where all the profit and all the growth
And I think
comes
you
in.
hit the nail on the head. I think part of the challenge in the data that HR teams get at the moment, well, there's lots, but part of the challenge in it being lagging data is, yes, you can look at attrition data, yes, you can look at engagement rates, yes, you can look at all of your surveys, but I think there's this quiet compliance in a workforce right now. Who are
acquiescence.
just doing. Yeah, exactly. I would
bare
say
minimum.
that, but I definitely couldn't say the word.
Presenteeism.
Presenteeism is a great word, right? So you're losing that discretionary effort. And that's a productivity and a workforce risk, and that's a dollar value, right? But unless you can link those together, then leaders are going to struggle to understand why quiet compliance is a problem for them.
I think it's not just the data, and that the manager needs to be able to have a very raw, honest conversation with their people on a regular, ongoing basis. And there's, I love all of the tools and personality profiling, you get all of these things, but it still comes down to the human connection that says, how are you doing? How are you? Like really, how are you? And what do you need this week? You don't seem yourself. Like, let's have a chat. And I think the data is a really great starting point, but it's how the managers can then, use that data and, dissect it and understand it to be able to really make that meaningful connection.
Yeah.
And some managers just don't have the social skills to be able to do that.
But it's also terrifying sometimes to say, look, I
100%.
know I've got to have that check-in. I can tell that person's not themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's something I said. I don't know if it's the work they're given, something going on outside the work. How do I broach that conversation?
Yeah.
So I think partly that is just helping. The idea of the data and the flow, as Sam puts it, is that at least you get that opportunity to break the ice in a way that doesn't offend or
100%.
terrify that individual. So if somebody asked me the way you said it, how are you? I would find that very uncomfortable. I'm not an open book. I've come across as that, but I wouldn't. If a manager had asked me, how are you really? I'd absolutely clam up.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. So knowing how to activate somebody in a way that they do want to talk, and it might mean that you need multiple steps.
Yeah,
it needs to be more gentle, and then get them to talk about something else, and then you kind of surreptitiously. But that's quite an art, isn't it? There's not a great,
Definitely. I mean, I have an 11-year-old son, and literally before we came in here, are you okay? Yeah, good. Great chat.
that lasts for the next decade, by the way.
Yeah, good. How do you stretch beyond that? But it's the same conversation in the workplace.
So how would you get him to open up? What are the ways, the techniques you'd use?
We create an environment. I mean, it was a very artificial environment
sure.
here, right? It's not used to that. So we always sit down and have dinner together, no TV, no phones.
Yeah.
And he knows that. So it's like, this is the time I have to have a conversation. So we create the environment.
Yeah.
I ask him questions, open questions. I know what he's doing with his day, so I will pick out the topics I know that he's interested in. What made you happy today? What was the thing that you really enjoyed most at school? So you can't get away with saying, yeah, good, to those questions.
Yeah, great.
So, but
Good.
like you say, it's a skill, it's an art to ask the right questions to get the information.
And in the work role that you've had, the work roles that you've had, but also the advice that you're giving to others in the community, how is HR leading that today? Like, where do you see practitioners? Because you're kind of adjacent to the business, not necessarily always inside it. It's often a place of last resort when something's going wrong. Hey, can you help me? So-and-so's leaving, or I want them to leave, or I've got to do a reorg, or I've got this other project. You get brought in often when situations are quite warm, if not boiling hot.
Yeah.
How does HR help? How should HR help solve this issue of connection inside the workplace?
I always say to managers that the conversation needs to come from them, because really the relationship should be with you. You don't want HR to rock up to the table and say, right, HR's here, because there's a reputation attached to that, right? So manager needs to have the conversation, talk about the individual. So if someone has raised a grievance, for example, like, tell me what's going on in their world. Are they going through a divorce? Are they are they having a difficult time? Tell me what's happening, and I would like the manager to know. 2 words that instill fear: role play. Like,
Okay.
but talk to me. Like, what are you going to say to them? Like, I'm really struggling to have this conversation, Claire. Like, what do I say to them? And then I will sit there and I will give them the words that they need to say so they can play it back to me. So it becomes a little bit more comfortable. But there are managers that will just shy away from having those difficult conversations. Probably why they end up in grievances and tribunals and the connection breaks down.
Let's go to that. So we've got real disconnection now.
Yeah.
You've got a situation where
Yeah.
trust is foundationally gone. You've seen that happen probably more often than you'd like to admit through different client situations. How do we preempt that so that it doesn't reach you as an issue? What are the tools and tips?
I think, first of all, we actually help people much sooner as a firm. I think generally people go to legal once it's hit the fan. Whereas actually what we say is have those conversations much earlier with advisors so that you can preempt if there is a problem. It's about asking the right questions much sooner rather than waiting for the grievance and then going, oh, okay, what's going on? And actually we could have had a framework in place where we're actually checking in on their well-being on a much more regular basis, or providing feedback loops so people can genuinely and honestly give feedback about how they work, how valued they feel, whatever it might be. And one of the things we do at Thrive, which has worked really well for us and some of our clients, is we create space. And I think that's what you were really saying about with your son. You create dedicated time and space for your son. And I suppose in the workplace, that's what managers often don't do. It's always reactive. It's like, there's a problem. What? Okay, yeah, I'll come back to it. And it's almost like because we don't create the space, people don't feel like they want to talk about stuff. So we create space physically on a quarterly basis in the office for a full day. Because we're a hybrid model, but we also create space monthly in the one-to-ones. And the first question is, what's on your mind? The second question is, how's your well-being? And then the third question relates to celebrating like successes, like what you're proud of at the moment. And they're really simple questions, but you can't leave them empty.
Nice.
So you start,
and everybody coming into the room knows they're going to be asked those.
Yeah,
questions.
they fill it in before the manager then gets to see it. So then if the manager has something that they're like, oh, this has come up, I don't know how I would deal with this, then we use the tools, we have a conversation, we go through what they might ask, and what support might be available, so then they go in equipped. So it's creating space in different ways, because if you just ask me that on the spot, I'd be like, I don't know what to say. So it's thinking about those learning styles and actually giving people time in advance to consider how they might be feeling, what is on their mind. And I get some really interesting things come out of that. It's like, my kids just started school and this happened and stuff just comes out. But you have to create the space, because we're all so busy and we're all wanting to be so productive, which is great for high performing teams to a degree. But if we don't create the space, those people are the ones that will become disconnected and feel like they can't continue pushing. And I certainly felt like that when I left my old job, and that's partly why I've created it in this way.
It sounds like a really good structure, and everybody knows it's coming. It's part of why they're there, right?
Yeah.
They know that they're being heard, they're being
It's a
respected
culture.
as individuals, and you have to walk the talk every time. Does that ever get skipped? Have you ever been in a situation where you too busy, or you've heard of another manager too busy to run those monthlies?
So we do them monthly, but we've just changed it to, if someone's more senior, they can do it every other month, because the focus is slightly different. They've got different stages and different career progression areas within it. But you fix that at the beginning of the year. So you'll say, these are the dates, they're being fixed, we both agree them. Even down to, I don't know if this is an overshare, but one of the team actually said, could I have it like part way through my cycle, because if I do my one-to-one the week I'm on my period or the week leading up, so it's even like being that honest about what actually, like, the timing doesn't really matter, does it, for a manager? It just needs to be at a frequency that you feel like you've got the pulse, right? So it's then going, well, what would work for them? And so somebody actually came out as a really junior employee in a team meeting when we discussed it, like what would make it better for you to be more engaged if you're receiving some difficult feedback? Like, what would the best environment be? And they said, well, just definitely not the week leading up or the week of my period, because I'll just cry. And I was like, that's really interesting. And I think certainly men don't think like that, but I hadn't really thought of it like that, because that's not how I react in that situation.
But you've created a space where that kind of comment could be made. And everyone goes, you know what, that makes sense.
Yeah,
right? So,
and it's actioned. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very good. Now, Alison, I know you are now a solopreneur, but you've worked you've led your own business, which had lots of staff, and you've worked inside a large organisation until very recently that I know you still help. What do you see as the kind of inhibitors to connection in the workplace, and effectively tools, a bit like Jodie, tools or ways of working that have helped make things better?
I think, so I'm going to talk through a data lens, right?
Yeah.
I think the data is all there, right? High attrition, conflict, poor performance, failed transformation, right? So there's data points that are all there, but they're used after the event, right? So to Jodie's point, they're used to react, right, rather than used proactively. So yeah, and by the time you get to an exit interview, right, I always think exit interviews are like autopsies, right? It's just, it's just too late, right? That's
they're always hugely revealing as well. Darn it, if I'd only known that.
Right, but you could have known that before, and I guess that's my point, is that the data is all there. And so if you can find a way to use the data as a yellow warning light that says, and I think you need to aggregate it as well as look at it at an individual level. These are the warning lights that I think we need to be looking at in our business, right? And because the answer is not as simple as X, right? Because for different employees, for different people, for different managers, for different leaders, the answer is going to be different. But the underlying data will still point you in the right direction. So I think using the underlying data as an early warning, yellow warning signal is a good starting point for any business.
It's very good. We did an analysis, a longitudinal analysis over the last 5 years of share prices, compound annual growth rate of the top 250 companies in the UK, and we tried to appropriate. We have a way of using AI constructively to get a general view of how connected an organisation is, and we can do that through the posts that people make in chat forums and social media and recruitment sites, etc. So thousands of those sites are then aggregated. You get a general sense of how connected a culture is. It has to be of a certain size in order for the data to be valid. You understand, Alison? And what we saw is there was a really, really strong correlation between growth and connection, and similarly shrinkage and disconnection. The two correlated really well. So there was a massive switch between companies that were the most disconnected, the bottom quartile, were shrinking about on average 4% over the last 5 years, which was huge, and those that are most connected were growing on average 5%. So you have like a 9% switch between disconnected and connected organisations. So we're proving that kind of discretionary effort piece at a macro level. But what we need to be able to do is say, okay, take the macro, and then how do I take it at a team level and an individual level to deliver those results? You can't just say, I'm going to make a culture more connected, I'm going to make a culture more engaged. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll have a one-day workshop once a year. We'll all go off-site, we'll have a barbecue, and we all know what happens, the marshmallow. We have a fab day. 80% of us thought it was the best day in their lives. 20% wish they weren't there. They go back, and then a week later, you've reverted to type. Everyone's forgotten all the nice stuff. So making that active, you use data, you talk about data a lot. That is your lens on the world. How do you use data in the flow, in the daily lives, to try and instill that, knowing that it makes a business impact? So
I would argue that your marshmallows, your employee engagement tools, your surveys that go out is all completely wasted money, right? It's just, because what you're doing is, that's a bit harsh, but you're measuring activity. That it's not wasted money. They are communications exercises rather than strategic decisions supported by data, right? And so when you start talking to a business leader about the impact of a disconnected workforce, then you start to get investment from that business leader in the areas that matter, right? And then you can start to say, okay, now let's pinpoint where the challenge is. And again, the data will lead to insight. Data is not the answer on its own, but is the challenge actually this manager over here needs supporting in this way, or is the challenge the workflow or the work process is wrong, or is the challenge something completely outside of work? But if you haven't got data pointing you in the direction for where the challenge is, then you're doing a broad brush marshmallow communication. I love marshmallows, but communications exercise. Just like to choose the people that I have marshmallows with. I think that's the answer, isn't it? But you need to make it a workforce strategy rather than a communications exercise.
And the great news, I think, that if we go back to the positives of AI, I'd like to ask you actually, Claire, a little bit about how you've instilled better cultures inside the organization, or if you have done that, or if you feel like you can go away and demonstrably see an improvement in the way a company is performing, and if so, the kind of tools that you've used, not just technology solutions, but workshops or events or leadership training. Like, what do you think are the top 5 things you can do as an HR practitioner that can really change a culture? So I think what you're saying about the engagement surveys, they act as a kind of correlative thing, right? You can spot a trend, and they're a trend but they're not data that you can take action from, right? Or you should take action from. I totally agree with that. But you will have done them in your organisations, and you'd have been really proud.
I know,
when
I was sat here just going,
your
I
ENPS
disagree.
is going up by 2. You disagree? Yeah. So please.
I think to create the culture, it's a combination of all of the little things that you're doing. Absolutely, you have to bring it together. So if you didn't do the annual away day, people would notice. If you cancel the Christmas party because you think, oh, it's just performative, people will then think, oh, is the business not doing well? And they would miss it. So whilst in isolation it might feel like it's not the best initiative, I do think having the engagement survey, having the away day, having one-to-ones, having really good conversations, having the tools, the data, I think it's a beautiful combination of everything kind of all coming together. So I worked for an organisation. So I started a new job. I was head of HR, and one of the directors came in and we were doing our intros and stuff. And he said to me, they hadn't had HR before. And he said, you're going to make me fill in lots of forms, aren't you? And I said, I promise you I won't. I said, if there are any forms, there'll be templates, there'll be guides for you. I am more interested in you having a conversation with an individual. And that was our starting point. Okay, right, we're going to do this one-to-one thing. We're going to introduce one-to-ones into this organisation. So if you're not having one-to-ones, like, really, really important speaking to your people. But then I started to talk to them about engagement. And they said, engagement's great. We don't have an issue. We don't have high turnover. It's fine. And, okay, shall we have a baseline survey? And they were like, oh, what's this engagement survey? They just hadn't done it before. So I gave them this report with the traffic light system on it. And on its own, in isolation, that would not have been helpful in any way. But I then ran sessions with the managers to educate them on what engagement is, discretionary effort, how important it is to the bottom line, because the directors are interested in the bottom line. So we ran sessions with them, told them what employee engagement actually was. It's not a happiness index. It's very different. And we started to have one-to-one conversations with all of the managers around that we've got this red stuff on this report, but what are your people actually telling you? Like, you need to go and have conversations with them. Do we now need to go and have focus groups and explore it further? So I think my top 5 things to do is kind of bringing all of these things together, really understand your people, like genuinely understand them, what motivates them, drives them, what gets them out of bed in the morning, know where they're going on holiday, do they have children, new puppy, whatever it is. So understand your people, talk to them, get the data, use the data, do something with it, but just like keep having the conversations and bring it all together. So I don't know if that answers your question entirely, but like the whole thing is important.
But it's not one thing. That's the point. But what you've described is a lot of discipline, a lot of doing the small things well and respectfully,
and
which
consistently.
is key. And for the receiver, we did a study for the business. I can't remember which journal it was, but our head of psychology did a research paper into empathy and the 2 dimensions of empathy. So there's the sender and the receiver. And one of the reasons why AI is preferred as a manager by 59% of people, according to Sam's example, is that an AI is by definition received empathetically by most. So because it says corroboratively, yes, well done, thank you very much, unless you've trained it like some of us have to be really obstreperous.
Know your rubbish.
and controversial.
Yeah.
It'll say, yes, oh, that's a good idea. Thank you, well done, good idea. I'd love to produce that massive paper for you that no one's going to read. But it sort of gives you that, or nobody with an attention span like me. But I think that the kind of little things building up is where the action really happens. But it's a lot of effort, isn't it, for a manager with a very busy life with 15 and direct reports now as opposed to 6 or what it would have been in the ideal world back in the day. But HR's clearly encouraging, and you're giving the model you've described is almost one-to-one, high-touch confidence to managers, giving them the conviction to go out and do those little things. How would you systematize that if your organization had 10,000 people?
So I've worked for very large organisations. I've worked for like global companies, and so one company was high performing, high engagement. This is probably 10 years ago. This is kind of pre-maternity leave. We didn't have all the whizzy apps and we didn't have AI, but we had structure. And for me, it's about the process, the structure, the training needs to be in place, and then you bring the technology in to kind of enable that.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yes.
So all of the kind of middle managers would have training. We expected one-to-ones. There were forms, there was templates. The performance process was mapped out, and you were very well incentivized to get your performance ratings up. Nice Christmas bonuses. So I think if you map out your process and your structure and what you want your organisation to look like, there's a million tools out there.
Yes,
there's performance management systems and all sorts of things.
And if your CEO understands the impact that has on the bottom line, then they will put more money behind it.
Without a doubt.
So I guess that's my point. I'm not saying an away day or marshmallows or any of those Christmas parties are bad things, but we have got to stop talking about this as a fluffy issue, right? And
how do you make the case for it then, Alison?
Because you talked about some of the numbers. You talked about the impact that disconnectivity has. You've talked about $9.7 trillion, right, lost. We've got to be able to join the dots between what the data is telling us and what business performance is actually happening, right, and the reasons behind that. Because then you can have a conversation with the CEO, whether they're a 10-person organisation or a 20,000-person organisation, to say, this is what freeing up this amount of your managerial time will do to your business, right? But without the data there, right, it's just a soft conversation again. And everyone goes, yeah, I know we should do that, but I'm not going to allow my managers to spend a day and a half a week leading people, right, or whatever it takes. So I think we've just got to be.
It feels like, I don't know.
Stronger.
I agree with you. I think it feels like you wouldn't buy a car and not put the right oil in or the right fuel in, right?
Or ignore the yellow warning light.
Or just drive it forever and never do a check in it, because at some point it's going to pop up and you have no idea what's going on. And it feels like we're sort of allowing and leaving, to some extent, our managers and our people a bit like that. We're just saying, get on with it.
Or your sales pipeline, right?
Yeah.
You would not look at your sales pipeline leaking in the way that your workforce or your talent pipeline leaks, and say, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it. We don't need to understand that more. You'd examine every single stage to understand why. And the challenge is, I think, that either leaders say that's actually too difficult to change, right? And so we need to help them understand how they change, or they don't care, right? And the optimist in me wants to believe that it is the first, that we need to help them to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's... Yeah, sorry, Claire.
I've worked for organisations where we have actually put people KPIs for managers.
Yes,
we have that.
And it felt a little bit uncomfortable to say, you need to have a conversation with your people. You need to be having X number of one-to-ones. But there are managers that do it quite naturally as part of their skill set, and other managers that just will focus on the day job and the stuff they have to do outside of the people management. But actually, we did see that these conversations were starting to happen, and probably as a result of engagement surveys telling us that one-to-ones weren't taking place. So actually putting a KPI and the manager's going, oh, in order to get my bonus, I need to do X number in revenue, I need to do this, and I need to do 95%.
Do you measure the quality of those? Because I've heard anecdotes of, one-on-ones happening because somebody's got a measurement on their bonus, and actually it had the detrimental effect on the motivation of the individual because they felt that they weren't being listened to and they weren't well run. Did you dig further into... I love the idea, by the way, you said earlier, of the process first and then map the tech to that rather than let the tech be the panacea.
Yeah.
As Sam pointed out, that's rarely the case. But did you get any evidence about a bad one-to-one backfiring?
through engagement surveys, we would continue to kind of get the commentary. I didn't hear what you've said, but I absolutely can imagine that could happen with managers that are being forced to have one-to-ones. But I think you almost need to find that starting point and, be willing to get the feedback that whilst I'm now having one-to-ones, they aren't actually effective or providing any value to me as an individual. So you're one step further forward, and then you go, right, how do you make these conversations more valuable, more effective? Providing managers with the right skills, training, kind of whatever they need, or not put that manager in the first place, going back to Alison's point earlier.
But that's where some of the Thomas data supports, right, that conversation.
Yeah.
So how does a manager have a different conversation about that individual because they understand that individual at a level that they may not have done previously?
We certainly understand their preferred communication style. We have really good examples. I have one personal anecdote of one of my direct reports being a very reflective individual who doesn't like surprises and likes time to process and likes preparation time. I'm, as Jodie knows, me reasonably well on that front. I, some ways, don't want to be over-prepared because I'll lose some of the energy that I bring into a situation. But she's the opposite. They are the opposite. And in that setting, what we discovered was if an agenda was set in advance of the meeting, then there was an opportunity to prepare. When we'd had the conversation, it wasn't about me delivering a load of requests in real time to put pressure on in the one-on-one, but there was a time for her to reflect back afterwards and go, okay, this is how I'm going to deliver that project, and I'm actually not going to do these 5 things because they were kind of bogus ideas, and it gave her control of the dialogue. And in that situation, there is also a clue that said, it's very much a people person, and asking about their time away from work and others is a good thing. There are other people where that really isn't in their mindset. It's like, just give me the job, get me in and out of this conversation as quickly as possible, and let me go and do the stuff I love doing. But don't dig down onto how my dog's doing or everything else.
I don't want to tell you about that.
I don't want to tell you about that. That's none of your business. And that doesn't mean the disconnect. It's just their preferred operating style. They're just like, just give me the work. I want to do that. So actually coming in armed, we do provide that. So we're at a time. We're at coming towards the end. I want to ask each of you a closing question, if I may. 2 parts for each of you. I'll go to start with Sam first, actually. First thing is, if you could do one thing today as a business leader, looking at their organisation, no matter whether it's flourishing or floundering at this current time, what would be the one takeaway that you'd like them to have to improve the connection? So let's assume we understand that it is a problem and that it needs resolving. What would you do to do it? The one thing, you're only allowed to do one thing as a leader. And the second part of the question is, how can somebody learn more about these things and learn more about what you're having to say on this topic?
Well, selfishly, I'm going to say what I've been banging the drum about for a long time. I would just put the data in the hands of the people to get themselves to know themselves better, and to get them to know and understand the relationship with their managers, their teams, their divisions, the organisation, so that you can all pull together more tightly. So I would tend to try and get that right into their fingertips, and I would give that to every single person, because it's not just on, I know we focus a lot on managers and division leaders and stuff today because they are at the coalface of these conversations, but the impetus and the onus on the employee to look at themselves and understand how they fit within a much bigger machine is, I think, imperative. So that's what I'd do. I'd get them into their profiling, get them to understand themselves much better, so that connection can start to build around those individuals.
And how can people find out more about this?
You can go to Thomas. Is that what I was supposed to say?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I've got, yeah, absolutely, yeah. How would they find out, and how would they find you? How can they connect to you?
Yeah, so I'm in LinkedIn. My name's Sam Buckley. I'm VP of Partnerships, if you want to find me on LinkedIn. But of course, there's the Thomas website. It actually has a glut of information. Just gone through a new rebrand, and there's loads of data on the embedded model under the partnerships section and elsewhere.
Brilliant, thank you. And Claire, may I come to you? 2 questions. The one thing,
so
and
much
then
people
how can
could do.
How can people find out more?
So I'm the founder of Elevate Hub, so I do have a website and prolific on LinkedIn, posting every day, so please connect with me on there. I think for me, hyper-personalisation is not a term that is used enough in organisations, and I think I would encourage managers to, we need to educate managers and actually the wider organisation on what are the benefits of hyper-personalisation, because if people truly understand how they can go from good to great by genuinely understanding what motivates and drives their people and how they would absolutely get the best out of them, their business will they will go from good to great. So education on hyper-personalisation.
Excellent, thank you.
I need you to repeat the question because I was listening so intently.
The one takeaway that you would want a business leader of an organisation to have as a result of, so that we assume connection or disconnection in the workplace is real, and it has material impact on financial performance and on the happiness and the engagement levels of the people that work therein. So what is the one thing that if you could wave a magic wand and you were advising them, you'd say, do this, and it will transform or at least improve the sense of connection in organisation? And then how can people follow you and find out more about your thinking in this space?
Okay, so I'm going to merge two things.
That's all right.
So I would say get the data and educate the managers on how to use the data so that they are making informed decisions, not assumptions, and using that to connect rather than, I suppose, just having a pot of information that is just there and no one uses it. So for me, it's a two-pronged one answer.
Yeah, no, that's right. No,
but it's right, because for me, I think there's one thing that I'm a huge advocate for is training managers, but training managers on what? And actually, I think it's that link between using the right data in the right way at the right time. I think that would be the one thing. And I'm all over. So just find me on LinkedIn, Jodie Hill, and then on TikTok and all of those other platforms, it's at I am Jodie Hill.
I am Jodie Hill. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Love
and
that.
Alison.
I've always been disobedient, so I'm definitely not giving you one thing. I'm giving you three. Right? Because in the world of AI, right, we spent quite a lot of time talking about AI, and I think it's important. So the first is stop talking about human in the loop. It's the most terrifying thing that you can do to your workforce, right? And start talking about human in the lead. How do we re-engineer work so that the human is in the lead, not in the loop? So that's my first.
Love that.
The second is please start thinking about opportunity and growth and not efficiency and cost cutting, because actually that is the opportunity that sits in front of us as humankind right now, is how can we become more creative? And so let's stop the lingo about how do we just cut jobs and all the rest of it, because the data doesn't support it. And then the third, which is then linked directly to disconnection, is to start saying, where is disconnection creating a business risk in my organisation and who is accountable for it? And if you can't answer that question, then you need to get some data to support the answer to that question.
Okay, so it arms perfectly in some ways with what Jodie and Claire have said, and actually what Sam was saying about, we need the data, but not just the data in isolation. We need to be able to train in the skills. We need to create the environment that works. So it needs to be there at our fingertips when we need it. It needs to be usable, right?
Because we're humans, right? Yeah, absolutely.
John Cooper, our Chief Connection Officer, always talks about people being, businesses looking at them as human doings and not human beings.
Yes.
And I know that other people have used that, but I really like that. It really feels like, what can I get out of that individual as opposed to how can I treat this person as an individual such that they can deliver their best work. Love it. I mean, we know when we've got someone pumped up in our teams, it's such a thrill as a leader, isn't it, to have that person go at it. And I don't like them working 80 hours a week, but when they're working on something that they would love, if they choose to do that, that's great, because we all know that won't last forever, because you've got to go through those phases. But there's such a thrill that I think when managers have a very engaged, connected individual working in their team, and better still an entire team like that, you can you climb mountains, you can break through walls, you can achieve anything. And that discretionary effort is financially necessary, isn't it?
100%, yeah. And you can find me at linkedin.com/Alison Ettridge.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Or
amplitas.com. But to your point, I don't, you talked earlier about, I work to spend more time with the horses. I actually do the work that I do now because I love it. Right? And the fact that I also get to spend more time with family and horses is a bonus.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Well, thank you, everybody, for sharing this conversation. It's been really interesting for me personally.
Thank you.
Necessary topic, I think, for both leaders and HR practitioners to really chew on for now. And I'm sure it'll be the first of many to come. So thanks for spending the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.